So this evening we are really lucky to be hearing about this stunning object, which you can see on your screens. And we're hearing from Antoine, who is known to so many of us and has been a great friend of the French Porcelain Society, and of course also president of the Society for the Musée for I think 28 years as their president, and he still sits on the board of Les Amis de Sèvres as well. Antoine spent over 35 years working at the Sèvres Manufactory, where he spent a great deal of time developing new pastes and glazes, colors, making soft paste porcelain, and really getting the quality of the porcelain up to such a high standard. And he was previously the head of the laboratory there for many years. So based on his technical knowledge, his experience and his wealth of experience and knowledge of the pieces at Sèvres, this evening he's going to be shedding some light, shedding some light on some new aspects of this amazing Vincennes-Sèvres figure known as La Source. So Antoine, I will hand it straight over to you. Thank you so much. Happy New Year to you all, and we're really looking forward to your lecture.
Well, thank you very much, and Happy New Year to everyone, and thank you to the French Porcelain Society to allow me to speak about this object, which has been in the last 2 years my favorite, because if it is not the nicest, it is the most interesting object. It is in the collection of the Louvre since the bequest of the widow of Adolphe Thiers, who was the first president of the Third Republic, and who was the one who had crushed the Commune of Paris. This piece is since 1881, and since I have heard of Vincennes, which was at the exhibition of the Grand Palais in 1777, I've heard that this piece was, if not totally fake, but at least redecorated. And when you look at the piece, it looks actually very, very strange, unused, and polychrome like that make you think of something that could have been done maybe by Samson, or maybe carrying the blue mark of the N with a crown from the Real Fabrica used by Ginori in this 1860. This piece is extremely big. You don't see that on the screen, but it's 52 centimeters wide, 40 centimeter high, and 35 depth. It's extremely heavy, weighs between maybe 15 or 20 kilos, and we had a really hard time lifting it to see what was underneath it. So you see it carries the Sèvres mark with the letter date D and the mark of Dodin. Now, letter date doesn't mean very much on an object like that, because between the moment it has been decided to do something like that and it comes out of the kiln, I would say, even working very hard, it lasts two years or even more. When the order came to the factory to do an object like that, everyone knew at the factory that it was an impossible task. You can do everything with soft paste as long as it is thin and light. And unless hard paste, you just cannot fire it without the greatest difficulties. The piece is to be fired at bisque. The chart lasts 24 hours, 2 days to cool down, and the same thing for the glaze. But when you begin to apply the colors on the transparent glaze, then you have to fire it extremely quickly, at least 1.5 hours. So you have to go up to 800 degrees in 90 minutes. And this was what was happening for normal pieces. But a piece like that, if you do this, it imploses at the raising of the temperature, and it explodes when it's cooling down. And yet the piece is there. So how was it received at the factory when the order coming from the entourage, very probably of Madame de Pompadour, what was the reaction? Jacques-Dominique de Courteil was in charge there since 5 years. He's 60 years old and is a man who is afraid of his own shadow. He would not have said anything. Henrik van Hulst was dead before. Jean Helot was there since 5 years, but he must have protested and said this is impossible to do, but he was too polite, probably very shy, and he was 72, he was an old man, he was a bore. So no one listened to him. Macaire is not yet arrived. Boileau is there since 11 years, and he knows perfectly this is totally impossible to do. He was there even before the Gérin's kiln was there, but he is a civil servant and he's always opening a parachute. Bachelier is there, and Bachelier, seeing that polychrome objects were proposed to the factory, he who had invented, as he said, the biscuit, well, he must have not have protested, and so the thing had to be done. There is someone whom one doesn't think very often. Often it's Lazare Duvaux. Lazare Duvaux belongs to the center of decision since the nationalization of the factory, of the manufacturer in 1771. In June 1771, Jean Helot arrived at the meeting of the owners of the factory and told them that they will not be longer the owner, they will be reimbursed, and he will have to collect all the secrets. So Lazare Duvaux is probably the one who had proposed that, and he had absolutely no idea of what he was asking from the manufacturer. So the glaze of the soft paste is a Plombeau alkaline glaze. If you look carefully at this drop here, you have exactly what is an alkaline glaze. It's extremely transparent, has no bubbles, is extremely shiny, is wonderful. And it permits to produce these colors like that, which are the alkaline colors, or for instance, this one, these two objects have been made by Betty Woodman with the paste I had developed at that time to, it is bone china, but it has exactly the same physical propriety than the Vincennes soft paste. So you can see you have bleu celeste and things like that. So devitrification, it's when you fire your colors too slowly. And here you have one of the most interesting jug of the collection of the Sèvres Museum. It's broken, and I must say, Henri de Fulvy must have been very, very sad when he had seen that, because it is Father Hippolytus gold, and yet the glaze is devitrified. Now, the kiln of Gérin was paid on the 3rd of May, 1748, and the gold was paid in November 48. So the piece should not have been devitrified. In fact, I think I have neglected to consider when were made the first payments to the Father Hippolytus, who was hiding very much his secret. He was selling the gold. He must have sold gold much earlier than the Gérin kiln was in function. So you see, the glaze is totally devitrified, and it's a horrible mistake when you have that. I had to endure this when I was making a service with a green ground for Giscard d'Estaing, service which was eventually not made. Now, the factory must have obeyed, because if it was decided, let's say in 54, the king had already given 100,000 pounds between 47 and 48. And then in 53, again, the price of the nationalization was 500,000 livres. And the creation of the Société Éloi Brichard would have cost 200,000 livres to the king, who was actually already the owner of a factory which had been created at a capital of 90,000. Now, at that moment, the new factory in Sèvres was being built, and the project it was impossible to refuse. When the new shareholder were reimbursed, they received 1,400,000, and the cost total of the operation would be 2,200,000. So it was impossible to refuse this task, and they did try, and they achieved to do it. Now, if you are in a condition like that, you don't want to do these small things. You want to make a precious object and prestigious object, such as, for instance, this Grand Plat from the service of Louis XV in the collection of the Duke of Buccleuch. Now, this piece is so big that it just doesn't fit in the saggers of the kiln, and it has to be introduced in the saggers in diagonal on a stand which they called a pupitre, which was a metallic device which leaves black dots on the reverse of the foot underneath. You have here the other one here, which is also a very, very beautiful color. Unfortunately, it is broken. They did receive a thermal shock when it was cooling down in the kiln a little too quickly. It's not impossible I just don't know. Now, these order came from upstairs and precisely Brimborion. Now I have to spend some time on this kiln, and you have to imagine that if you consider that considering the amount of paste and glaze which have been brought to Gravant, you can imagine that the quantity of pieces made in a year was maybe 8,000 to 10,000 pieces a year, but only 5,000 to 6,000 were decorated. The others remained in the Magasin Blanc, and it's a good management to have in a manufacture like ours a good reserve of whiteware. Now, who was directing the kiln? This kiln is 17 meters high, and it's directed by Antoine Capel. He has 30 years old. He is described as bien fait, le visage plein et grêlé de petites vérolles. He must be on one end of the kiln. On the other side of the kiln, you have Armand le Cadet. He is 31 years old. He is described as portant cheveux, le visage long, la joue gauche balafrée, cicatrisée, et les lèvres toujours en mouvement. And you have someone extremely important, and this is the chef des peintres, and it's Geneste. He is only 25 years old. He's described as being très mince, la physionomie fort blanche et petite, la bouche en travers en parlant, de grands yeux bleus et la voix enfantine, a childish voice. He must have an extraordinary authority on the 40 painters who were on the fourth floor, plus the 10 gilders, who were all impatient to have their pieces fired to see the result and terrified to have dust falling on their work when it's unfired. The campaign lasted 3 days, and the kiln, you have here a preheating room. You can here open the door, and you put, the porcelain is put in this sagger. Here we know exactly the measurement. The sagger is put on this slide here and introduced in there. And with these instruments, they push it in the preheating room. Now, to fire the plates, normal plates, as I said, it's last only 90 minutes and you have no vitrification. But if you don't want a huge and heavy piece like the Naiad not to explode, well, I guess they would have put the Naiad in the preheating room the day before, when it was at, let's say, 100 degrees. And the next day they would have opened this door here and closed this one, and it would have pushed, I would say, they would have pushed through the kiln within maybe 8-9 hours. So it's impossible that in this condition, the glaze doesn't devitrify, and it is not devitrified. So something has been found. Regarding Geneste, who is running up and down the fourth floor, the painters knows approximately at what time their piece must be fired, but they don't know when and what is important. And Geneste knows what is important, what is the services have to be fired together, coming from different painter, and it's an whole organization. Each campaign every month would produce 600 pieces, but these pieces are fired 4, 5 or 6 times, and in 3 days 2,400 pieces are fired. This is in a day 80 pieces. So you imagine the role of the head of the painters, who is extremely has a huge authority on his painters. So now, to explain what happens when the temperature goes up, the outside is warmer than the inside. So the outside expands and the inside doesn't. So it does imploses. And if you were inside the piece, you would hear gling, 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 gling. And the piece, remain together, and does it is totally broken inside, but the pieces remain together. In the cooling process, it's the contrary. In the cooling process, then the pieces explodes in many, many pieces if it's cooled too quickly. Now, we come back to this and we looked at, in fact, is really a strange object. And I really understand that many experts have suggested it is wrong. If you see the stripe of the tunic here, they point out it was not yet the fashion in '53. The bleu celeste is not at all how it should be. The yellow is green, and all the terrace is so covered with colors. You have something here that could maybe look like the fond violet of the beakers, which belong to Tim Clark, and or the potpourri Pompadour. Now, to compare the colors used at that period, the best example is to go back to the Bouquet de la Dauphine, delivered in '49. You see here, the purple is much nicer than it is in reality. It is brown. But take a look at the gold. It's wonderful. And the glaze is shiny. Now, here is how the purple should be. Now, the bleu celeste is not like that in these years, but you know that in '55, Hello complains that the colors the glass coming from Venice is too irregular, and that he had to compose himself a new bleu celeste. Now, all of you who like Vincennes have never seen that the bleu celeste before '55 is irregular. It's very regular and extremely beautiful indeed. Now, the yellow is really yellow, and in fact, you speak of jaune jonquille and jaune citron, but in fact, we see in the inventory that there is only one yellow, and it is this one. Please note, now you see it is here absolutely greenish. And here it's something, bleu celeste has been probably applied on only one layer and probably on the bisque. Now, take a look at the bleu celeste, how it was from the service of Louis XV again. Wonderful piece. Now, take a look at the work here done by Le Boiteux. And all these mounted flowers, which are mostly mounted later, never you have this extraordinary work of the leaves corresponding always to the flowers. I take your attention to this blue here. It is the bleu de Caillat, which you see on his palette. It's not to be confused with this blue one here, which comes in 51, invented by Jean Helot, who invented that in 15 days. How come a man who had never done chemistry of high temperature could have developed such a beautiful blue if the nationalization had not been somewhere, sometime predicted? Now, on the rear of the piece, it's really strange, don't you agree? Now, if you look at this thing, well, it is a detail of a 19th century Haviland earthenware of the Atelier d'Auteuil, made of the end of the 19th century. And we have a text here written by Jean Helot on the 3rd of November 52. Sorry to read in French, but he said, quand les bons peintres de Vincennes auront des originaux forts de peinture, tels que le seraient ceux de M. Oudry à copier, quand ils sauront parfaitement employer les couleurs d'émail sans faire trop de mélange sur la palette, quand on cuira ces couleurs comme en saxe, vous aurez, monseigneur, ce que vous souhaitez. Now, this is a good lecture to take the archive with the greatest caution. What a strange idea to propose to fire like in Saxony when the kiln we had was the most wonderful. But the greatest lie is 3 lines over. He said, si l'on examine chaque les couleurs à la loupe, on ne les trouve pas supérieures à aucune de celles de Vincennes, propose about the Saxe. Il n'y a que les rouges vermillons de l'ancien Saxe qui soient un peu plus beaux, encore que l'on n'a pas l'attention qu'on a de les placer à côté d'une couleur obscure qui les fasse ressortir. This is totally untrue. We had no decent iron red before Jean-Jacques Bailly in the 60s. Now, the jar here you see as a marble, and why did this petrify? It went through the kiln maybe 4 or 5 times. The reason why it was not devitrified is because the old piece is glazed with a tin glaze. And this gives the impression of an 18th century faience and not at all like a porcelain. It looks like Chantilly. Now we have many, many formula of tin glaze, especially in the book of Gravant, which he had brought back from Chantilly. And in the first period of Chantilly, there was a polychrome decoration in petit feu, and they had to have this tin glaze, especially to avoid this devitrification. They had not the kiln. So why doesn't tin glaze devitrify is because tin oxide is a very refractory oxide which opposes, and it contains a lot of lead, opposes the devitrification of the glaze during the subsequent firing in muffle kiln. Interesting enough, in the book of Hello, he says, composition of a tin glaze which we are going to use next in the next days. Unfortunately, he doesn't say the date. Now, tin glaze were not uncommon. Take a look at this Poao, which is representing Louis XV during the campaign of the Flanders, very probably in 44. With the help of Madame Klein from the Musée des Armées, all the uniform have been identified, and you have a Swiss guard here in red. You have a garde française in blue, and in green, a corps of cavalry created by Maurice de Saxe in 43. But how do we know this is Louis XV? We know it because in front of him, there is here a man in yellow, and this man is a garde de la Manche, and only the king would be accompanied with garde de la Manche during the campaign. You see the brown here is very brown, and it's earlier than the colors bought by Tony. But you have all these dormeuses here from the Louvre, which is a tin glaze. And also in the collection of Belvedere, you have the chasseur d'oiseaux and you have the chasseur de lapins. But not only that, and the TFF 2 years ago, these two wonderful Naiad and Fleuve, which are also tin glaze. You see that when you look them upside down. Now, what are the equivalent big pieces made in these crazy years? You have the Chinois soutenant une corbeille from the Musée de Sèvres. It's already devitrified, and it has not been even tempted to be colorized. Obviously, it is not covered with a tin glaze. But you have in the royal collection this clock, which is also the same Chinois soutenant in corbeille. Notice that the piece is gilded and that the gold has been polished. This is very interesting because the piece you will see later is in 1,000 pieces, but it held together like a puzzle, which is in 100 of pieces, holds together because of the shape of the pieces inside. Now, thanks to David Wheeler, I have received this incredible document of the state of this Chinois soutenant in corbeille. You see, I think it's only 1/3 of or even 1/10 of the old thing. And you see all these small pieces here. David Wheeler was kind enough to send me some pieces which have been submitted to analyze. I wanted to see if it had been a tin glaze or not. The result was that it was not a tin glaze, but that there were two different glazes. So when the piece was glued together with an incredible patience, the people who had made this work in the 19th century had filled up with everything they had under their hands, maybe Mency or Saint-Cloud pieces. Now, I would like to talk about this King Charles, which I would like to date of the same period. It has been pointed out that the marquetry is later, and which I can believe certainly. What I think is very strange is here, this I think is very 19th century looking, but the piece, the dog is in pieces, has been glued, and is not to be seen sold in these years. So it has been put apart or just given or waited until it could be recuperated and mounted. To my opinion, it dates from the same years, 54, 55. Dogs have been found in 66, painted also by Dodin, but in 66, you remember that China clay was coming from Passau in Austria at that time, and the first pieces of hard paste were made. So I really think this is to be dated from the same period as the Naiad, because in 66, Marquis de Pompadour is dead since 2 years. Bertin couldn't care less about this thing. He was only interested in hard paste, and everyone knew that it was impossible to do. Now, the animal is actually Mimi la Fidélité. This is proven by this box that you know very well, belonged to Madame de Pompadour, and is written on it, Mimi ou la Fidélité. Now we have this Louis XV, who is a tin glaze. I would not refuse it as Vincennes, since I vaguely remember, but it has been so long, having seen in the inventory of 55, 56, the mention of a bust of Louis XV. Also see the hole here, which is probably to mount something. Now, Bernard Ragesco refused it. No, Bernard Ragesco is affirmative. It is Chantilly. He knows Chantilly much better than I do. So let's remain what he says. I think he is probably right, but I would not refuse it as a. Now, in 17 and 70, the hard paste comes. And what a joy to finally put in color figures that will not devitrify. 10 years ago, everyone would have said this is a fake, just as this Dr. Fagon could have been described as a fake. The Dr. Fagon from the collection in Philadelphia is even stranger, because when you look at it, you see soft paste, but it is in fact hard paste. I'm convinced that in the Dr. Fagon from the collection in Philadelphia has been applied a lead flux on the figure, so that the colors could shine as if it were soft paste. So I have hoped to not have been boring you like Jean Helot must have been a bore to his contemporary, and I pass to the next living room lecture on the 20th of January. Do you hear me?
Antoine, absolutely. Thank you so much for that wonderful lecture. And yes, we will go to Q&A very shortly, but just to mention our next lecture, which you can see on the screen at the moment, that is going to be in 2 weeks' time on Sunday, the 30th of January, again at 6 o'clock. And we're really delighted to be joined by Timothy Wilson, John Mallett, and Elisa Sani, who will be speaking to us about a new book which they have edited called Maiolica in Italy and Beyond. So please do join us for that in a couple of weeks to head to Italy for that living room lecture. But now I'd love to invite anyone who would like to ask any questions or make any comments to put that into the chat box, and we'll be able to deal with those in a moment. I think, Antoine, what I love particularly about all of the things that you're saying is just there's so much knowledge that comes from your own experience actually working in the factory and with these with the kilns and with the different temperatures, and even I think it's the bit where you said about the large bleu celeste platter, the fact that would have to have sat diagonally to fit into the kiln. I just think there's so much that we can always learn about historic practices from actually thinking about them today, which is very, very interesting. Very, very interesting. We've had quite a few comments come through saying thank you so much for that amazing lecture. A quick question has come through about if you could say a bit more about the story of La Source, La Naiade. What is the actual object showing, and what story is it telling us?
Well, yes, it was bought by Lazare Duvaux for 600 pounds in the summer 57, and he sold it to Hébert in September 57. I think Lazare Duvaux didn't mount it because he was ill at that time, and this is maybe the reason why he had not the courage of mounting this himself. I don't know. If the mount are Duplessis or not. Have no knowledge about that. I think it doesn't really compare with the terrace of the Bouquet de la Dauphine, which is absolutely superb. Duplessis for the terrace of the Bouquet de la Dauphine received 1,455 livres, and but the mount by Le Boiteux must have been extremely expensive.
Do you know if the mounts have ever been separated from the porcelain at the Louvre? Has that ever taken place?
I didn't understand the question.
I was just wondering if they have ever separated the mounts from the figures at the Louvre.
I don't think so. Not that I have heard of. All I know is that the curator of the Louvre have always accepted it as a real object. It was at the exhibition of 1777 and the exhibition at Versailles by Marie-Laure de Rochebrune as a real object.
Yes, of course. Thank you.
Regarding the stripe, I've asked around people who were specialists in textile, yes, and they say that in this period, it could be possible to have such a, in the very fashionable circle, to have a tunique like that.
That's very interesting, thank you. We've had a question come through from Errol Manners asking, is it easy to test for tin glaze with XRF analysis? And have you found that there are quite a few Vincennes pieces with tin in the glaze?
No, because I never had we had a huge X-ray diffractometer, and we had been able to put huge things on it, including the clock of the Louvre. Rosaline Saville was there and might have remembered that we analyzed that, and this was with Pierre Inès, and when the analysis was made and came to the result we thought it was star-based, the clock was carefully packed in the car of the Louvre, and the car of the Louvre rushed away out the manufacturer, and we heard "Keek!" It was the brake of the car. We just escaped an accident coming out of the factory.
Wow, lucky save. Wow, thank you so much. We've had a question come through from Anne Anderson asking if you know anything about how the Louvre acquired the piece in 1881. Do we know the provenance of the object at that point in the late 19th century?
Not before 81, no.
Yeah, that's very interesting.
It must have belonged to the Thiers family since quite a long time. Mm-hmm. It was given after the death of Madame Thiers, who overlived Adolphe Thiers.
Brilliant. Thank you so much. We've had a question come in from Marine Fargaton asking if you could speak a bit more about the process of devitrification, which you mentioned.
Oh, devitrification is the formation of crystals. If you remember that very transparent drop of glaze which I have shown, it's a very liquid glaze, and if you have germs of anything in that glaze, when you cool it, these germs create crystals. And if you very slowly, then you can have the crystal grow. And this is how crystallization were made at Sèvres by accident when they tried to find finally the glaze for the Porcelain Nouvelle, trying everything they could, including zinc, including introducing zinc into the glaze. And this is what is the formation of this crystallization. So what you have to do to stop that crystallization is to increase the refractority and increase the viscosity so that the crystal cannot grow. Excuse me for this little hello-like boring explanation.
No, that's really very useful, and I think has absolutely answered that question, so thank you. A sort of final question has come in asking about the workers in the factory in the 18th century in general. Did they have quite a lot of health problems? You mentioned the kiln masters, your description of them makes them sound rather sickly. Was this because of the fumes, the lead fumes, and the chemicals they're working with? Have you found much information about that?
Certainly Gravant, who was a crook, died of many diseases. He had to smell lead oxide vapors. He had to smell chlor. He had to smell sulfate. Imagine that the workers in winter worked from 6 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the evening, and in the wind and in the summer from 5 o'clock in the morning to 7 o'clock in the evening. They were working very hard. They had their Sunday free, and the historians admit that they, on top of that, about 30 days of holy days. So they had approximately 80 days of vacation in their year. But imagine if you are a painter working from 5 o'clock in the morning to 8 o'clock in the evening. In average, you paint half of the year in the dark with candles. And this explains why we have something which was very difficult to explain, is the very poor quality of the bouquet détaché, which you see during the century after Vincennes. It's really junk. Excuse me for that.
I think, yes, of course, the fact they were using candles, I mean, their eyesight.
They had to pay their own candles.
Eyesight must have deteriorated quite a lot as well, actually. Yeah, brilliant. Thank you so much. Well, I'm just aware of time, but thank you, Antoine, for that fantastic lecture. We had, I think, over 195 people tuning in, which is truly amazing for a Sunday evening currently. So thank you all so much for coming. And Antoine, thank you for sharing your knowledge and your passion for the subject and to telling us more about that wonderful object now at the Louvre. And you can join us all again in 2 weeks' time, Sunday, the 30th of January, to head off to Italy to hear all about Majolica from the wonderful trio of Timothy Wilson, John Mallet, and Elisa Sani. But on that note, thank you all so much for coming. Antoine, a huge thank you for that lecture, and a very happy New Year to you all. Thanks so much for joining the French Porcelain Society once again. Take care, everyone.
Thank you very, very much. And don't be surprised by my head. I have been shaven because I had a head operation last month.
We're very, very grateful that you are here with us still today, Antoine. So thank you, more so for that for the lecture a few weeks. So yes, absolutely. Go and rest. And thank you so much.
Thank you.
Take care, everyone. Good night.
Thank you.